The Secret Garden, Chapter 22. When the sun went down. When his head was out of sight, Colin turned to Mary. "Go and meet him," he said, and Mary flew across the grass to the door under the ivy. Dickon was watching him with sharp eyes. There were scarlet spots on his cheeks, and he looked amazing, but he showed no signs of falling. "I can stand," he said, and his head was still held up, and he said it quite grandly. "I told thee thou could as soon as thou stopped being afraid," answered Dickon, "and thou stopped." "Yes, I've stopped," said Colin. Then suddenly he remembered something Mary had said. "Are you making magic?" he asked sharply. Dickon's curly mouth spread into a cheerful grin. "Thou doing magic thyself," he said. "It's same magic as there were working out on the earth," and he touched his thick boot to a clump of crocuses in the grass. Colin looked down at them. "Aye," he said slowly, "there couldn't have been bigger magic there than thee. There couldn't have be." And he drew himself up straighter than ever. "I'm going to walk to that tree," he said, pointing to the one a few feet away from him. "I'm going to be standing when Weatherstaff comes here. I can rest against the tree if I like. When I want to sit down, I will sit down, but not before. Bring a rug from the chair." He walked to the tree, and though Dickon held his arms, he was wonderfully steady. When he stood against the tree trunk, it was not too plain that he supported himself against it, but he still held himself so straight that he looked tall. When Ben Weatherstaff came through the door in the wall, he saw him standing there, and he heard Mary muttering something under her breath. "What art saying?" he asked rather testily, because he did not want his attention distracted from the long, thin, straight boy figure and proud face. But she did not tell him. What she was saying was this: "You can do it. You can do it. I told you you could. You can do it. You can do it. You can." And she was saying it to Colin because she wanted it to make magic and keep him on his feet looking like that. She could not bear that he should give in before Ben Weatherstaff. He did not give in. She was uplifted by a sudden feeling that he looked quite beautiful in spite of his thinness. He fixed his eyes on Ben Weatherstaff in his funny, imperious way. "Look at me," he commanded. "Look at me all over. Am I a hunchback? Have I got crooked legs?" Ben Weatherstaff had not quite gotten over his emotion, but he had recovered a little and answered almost in his usual way. "Not tha," he said. "Now out the sort. What's tha been doing with thyself, hiding out of sight and letting folk think you was a cripple and half-witted?" "Half-witted?" said Colin angrily. "Who thought that?" "Lots of fools," said Ben. "What did thou shut thyself up for?" "Everybody thought I was going to die," said Colin shortly. "I'm not." And he said it with such decision, Ben Weatherstaff looked him over, up and down up. "They'll die," he said with dry exultation. "Now that art the sort. Thou got too much pluck in thee. When I see thee pull the legs on the ground in such a hurry, I knowed thou was right. Sit thee down on the rug a bit, young master. Give me thy orders." There was a strange mixture of crabbed tenderness and shrewd understanding in his manner. Mary had poured out speech as rapidly as she could as they came down the long walk. The chief thing to be remembered, as she told him, was that Colin was getting well. The garden was doing it. No one must let him remember about having humps and dying. The Rajah condescended to a seat on a rug under the tree. "What work do you do in the gardens, Weatherstaff?" he inquired. "Anything I'm told to do," answered old Ben. "I kept on by favor because she liked me." "She?" said Colin. "The mother," answered Ben Weatherstaff. "My mother?" said Colin, and he looked at him quietly. "This was her garden, wasn't it?" "Aye, it was that," said Ben Weatherstaff, and looked at him too. "She were main fond of it. But it is my garden now. I am fond of it. I shall come here every day," announced Colin. But it is to be a secret. My orders are that no one is to know we come here. Dickon and my cousin have worked and made it come alive. I shall send for you sometimes to help, but you must come when no one can see you." Ben Weatherstaff's face twisted into a dry old smile. "I've come here before when no one saw me," he said. "What?" exclaimed Colin. "When?" "The last time I was here," rubbing his chin and looking around, "was about 2 years ago." "But no one has been in it for 10 years, cried Colin. "There was no door." "I'm no one," said Ben dryly. "I didn't come here through the door. I came over the wall. The rheumatics held me back over the last 2 years. "The cum did a bit of pruning," cried Dickon. "I couldn't make out how it had been done." "She was fond of it, she was," said Ben Weatherstaff slowly, "and she was such a pretty young thing. She says to me once, 'Ben,' she says laughing, 'if ever I'm ill or I go away, you must take care of my roses.' When she did go away, the orders was no one to come nigh. But I'd come," with grumpy obstinacy. "Over the wall I'd come, until the rheumatics stopped me, and then I did a bit of work once a year. She gave me her order first." "It wouldn't been as wick as if it hadn't done that," said Dickon. "I did wonder." "I'm glad you did it, Weatherstaff," said Colin. "You know how to keep the secret." "I know well, sir," answered Ben, "and it'll be easier for a man with rheumatics to come at the door." On the grass near the tree, Mary had dropped her trowel. Colin stretched out his hand and took it up. An odd expression came into his face, and he began to scratch at the earth. His hand was weak enough, but presently, as they watched him, Mary with quite breathless interest, he drove the end of the trowel into the soil and turned some over. "You can do it! You can do it!" said Mary to herself. "I tell you, you can!" Dickon's round eyes were full of eager curiousness, but he did not say a word. Ben Weatherstaff looked on with an interested face. Colin persevered. After he turned a few trowelfuls of soil, he spoke exultantly to Dickon in his best Yorkshire. "The said as the had me walking here is the same as the other folk, and the said that had me digging. I thought I was just leaning to please me. This is the first day I've walked, and here I am digging." Ben Weatherstaff's mouth fell open again when he heard him, but he ended by chuckling. He said, "that sounds as if he got his wits now. Thou art a Yorkshire lad for sure, and thou art digging too. How'd they like to plant a bit of something? I can get thee a rose in a pot." "Go and get it," said Colin Dickon excitedly. "Quick, quick!" It was done quickly enough indeed. Ben Weatherstaff went on his way forgetting rheumatics. Dickon took his spade and dug the hole deeper and wider than a new digger with thin white hands could make it. Mary slipped out to run and bring back a watering can. When Dickon had deepened the hole, Colin went on turning the soft earth over and over again. When he looked up at the sky, flushed and glowing with strange new exercise, slight as it was, "I want to do it before the sun goes quite down," he said. Mary thought perhaps the sun held back a few more minutes just on purpose. Ben Weatherstaff brought the rose in its pot from the greenhouse. He hobbled over to the grass as fast as he could. He had begun to be excited, too. He knelt down by the hole and broke the pot from the mold. "Here, lad," he said, handing the plant to Colin. "Set it in the earth itself, same as the king does when he gets a new place." The thin white hands shook a little, and Colin's flush grew deeper as he set the rose in the mold and held it while old Ben Weatherstaff burned the earth. It was filled in and pressed down and made steady. Mary was leaning forward on her hands and knees. Soot had flown down and marched forward to see what was being done. Nut and Shell chattered about from a cherry tree. "It's planted," said Colin at last, "and the sun is only slipping over the edge. Help me up, Dickon. I want to be standing when it goes. That's part of the magic." And Dickon helped him. And the magic, or whatever it was, so gave him strength that when the sun did slip over the edge and end the strange, lovely afternoonness for them, he actually stood on his 2 feet, laughing.